And here we are at the concluding session of the first day of the Chennai Literature and Art Festival 2022. Value of Words is collaboration with Chennai International Center here at Kalakshetra Foundation. Let me invite the moderators. Let me introduce them first. In alphabetical order, Dr. C. Chandramouli. I have introduced him to you already. Before I invite him to join us here on the days that is on the ground, I want to also introduce our next moderator. The Honorable T.S. Tirumurthy is a retired Indian civil servant, read Ambassador, of the Indian Foreign Service, CADA. He has served as the Secretary to the Government of India and later as the permanent representative of India to the United States in New York when India became a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for the 8th time. During his tenure, India was elected to the UN Security Council in July 2020. India was also elected to the UN Commission on the Status of Women and the Advisory Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Questions for predefined terms. Among the many capacities he has served in, he was also the Joint Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Division. He has also served as Secretary of Economic Relations in the Ministry of External Affairs, India, handling the economic relations portfolio, which included, among others, the Gulf and the Arab world, Africa, and India's development partnership. He has served as the chair of the UN Secretary Council's Taliban Sanctions Committee, Libya Sanctions Committee, and the Counter-Terrorism Committee at various times. His response, please permit me this, sir. His response to the Dutch envoy Karel van Oosterom's tweet captivates one's mind and says everything about the diplomat. You should not have abstained in the GA, respect the UN Charter, tweeted his Dutch counterpart. Shri Tirumurthy replied, kindly don't patronize us, Ambassador. We know what to do. Now, we know the diplomat. To know the author, his published works are Kissing the Heavens, the Kailash, Manasarovar Yatra, Clive Avenue, and Chennai Vasi. It is such an honor to have you here with us. May I also invite Dr. Chandramouli to join us? It is only fitting that the force behind value of words should be the author that closes day one. Before I talk about what the session is, I am going to introduce him and I am going to invite him here at the end of it, and then I will share with you what this session is all about. Like I said earlier, I would be introducing Dr. Sanjeev Chopra in parts because he is here in many, many different capacities. And let me embarrass you one final time today, Dr. Chopra. One final time today. There's still tomorrow. Dr. Sanjeev Chopra was a member of the IAS. He has served as the District Magistrate of Murshidabad, who is the CEO of Himul and Siliguri Jalpaiguri Development Authority. He was the ADM of Cooch Behar and the SDO at Ghatal and Kalimpong in Darjeeling. From 2002 to 2007, he served the government of Uttarakhand as the Secretary to the Industrial Development and Information Technology Departments. From 2007 to 2010, he was Principal Secretary to the Government of West Bengal in the Agriculture, Food Processing and Horticulture departments. From 2010 to 2015, he was the Mission Director for the National Horticulture Mission and the National Mission on Micro Irrigation and the Managing Director of the NAFED and National Horticulture Board, besides looking after international cooperation in the Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India. Till the 31st of December 2019, he was the Additional Chief Secretary to the Government of West Bengal in the Departments of Industry, Commerce and Enterprises, as well as the Director General of the Administrative Training Institute, Kolkata. Dr. Chopra served the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, Missouri, as its director up till the 31st of March 2021. Post his superannuation, he studied the political economy of the reorganization of Indian states, which was published by HarperCollins India in November 2022 and is on the table for discussion today. We, the people of Bharat, the making and remaking of India's internal boundaries. Let's welcome Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. While I have invited our three guests here for today's concluding tete-a-tete, I'm naming the session. But before that, of course, a quote. This one I'm sharing now because the gentleman would take it forward from here. Jonathan Galassi wrote in Muse, "Out with the old, in with the aftermath." Session 5, Maps and Milestones in the Making of Bharat.
So good evening to this session. It's been a long day, I know, but I think it'll be worth it when you hear Sanjeev expounding on his seminal work, and I'm sure many more to come. Normally, we've been quite conversant with the international boundary issues. But what happens within the country? How were the states formed? What happened to the enclaves which were part of India? What happened to the foreign territories which formed part of India? What happened to the princely states? I think it's a fascinating story. It's a story of India's history and told in a very, very lucid manner as he goes from one state to the other, covering the entire country. I think it's a must read for anyone who's interested in the history of this country. So without further ado, I'd first ask Sanjeev to take us through this book. And then, of course, both of us are here to put him on the hot seat. And we promised that we would do so. And we can take the liberty because both of us are batchmates of his. So all three of us are from the same batch of the civil service, and therefore we have all the rights to roast him at the end of his session. So look forward to that, and let's hand over the floor to Sanjeev.
Okay, thank you. And before I'm roasted, I might as well speak my mind before I get roasted. And that's what I was telling in the batchmates group, that today I'm going to be grilled and drilled by my distinguished batchmates. Okay, friends, first, how this book started. We were taking the officers of the 2020 batch of the IAS. They'd gone to the Survey of India. I'd gone with them to the Survey of India in the month of February 2020. And we were trying to look at the new survey techniques because remember when we were doing our district training, we had those Gunter chains and theodolite surveys to measure land, because at the end of the day, revenue administration is all about measuring land, and so we did it in a very conventional manner. But now Survey of India has come up with some very new techniques of measuring land, both through satellite imagery, drone surveys, and many things. So while these technical sessions were going on, I just happened to visit the museum of the Survey of India, and I saw the first map which the Survey of Bengal had produced, because at some point of time the Survey of Bengal, 1796, and they showed India as it was in 1796. That is the possessions of the East India Company. in 1796. And then there were maps upon maps upon maps. And then finally, Survey of Bengal had moved to Dehradun, and Dehradun became the Survey of India. There's a Madras connection as well, because the trigonometrical survey started from here, but then the Survey of India was in Dehradun. So what I noticed and what I realized was that every time the name of a state is changed, every time the territory of a state is reorganized, a new map is brought up by the Survey of India. And from 1947 to 2019, there were about 80 maps which were on display, which showed how India had changed from 1947 to 2019. Now, when I looked at the map of India in 1947, the masthead read India, Indian Dominion, provinces, states, and districts of the Indian Dominion, because at that time we had 9 provinces. 2 had gone to Pakistan, and Punjab and Bengal had been, divided into East Pakistan and East Bengal and West Bengal, likewise with Pakistan. And the Northwest Frontier Province and Sindh had opted to go to Pakistan. So there were 9 provinces and 562 princely states on the map of India in 1947. Now, interestingly, after 2019, when Jammu Kashmir also got reorganized as the Union Territories of Ladakh and Jammu Kashmir, today there is not one province, one state, one territory which bears the same name as it had in 1947. So Madras state is no longer the Madras state. Bombay is very different. Punjab is very different. Hyderabad is no longer that Hyderabad. Mysore is no longer that Mysore. There is not one unit in the country which bears the same name. So is it like the ship of Theseus? Is it that when every part of the ship has changed, when every part of the ship has changed in the last 70 years, are we talking about a new ship? Or is it the same ship which has been changing so gradually? And that's what led me to look at the various maps. So I saw the map of 1947, then I looked at the map of 1950. In the map of 1950, the word provinces disappears and it says states under the new Indian Constitution. So that was the first map of the Republic of India. So between the Dominion of India and the Republic of India, and that's how the title of this book also comes, this is We the People of the States of Bharat, because India had provinces and Bharat had states. So that is the reason why the word states has been used here instead of provinces. Now, between 47 to 1950 is a great story, because but for 3 states, that is Jammu Kashmir, Hyderabad and Junagadh, all the other 559 states had signed the instrument of accession and also the merger agreement. The instrument of accession gave India the rights to defense, communication, foreign affairs. But the merger agreements, the states got the privy purses and all the other powers, the revenue powers, the administration powers, judicial powers, all of them were also given over to the states. Before I move on to the map of 1950, I just wanted to share with all of you that the Britishers wanted us to call ourselves the Republic of Hindustan, Dominion of Hindustan and Pakistan. They never wanted us to use the word India for whatever reasons, but Mr. Menon, and I would say full tributes, full marks to Mr. Menon, Mr. VP Menon, because there are so many famous Menons, including Kishore Menon, but we are talking here about Mr. VP Menon, who had the foresight to say that India will be known as Bharat and India and not Hindustan, because in the British conception of things, they wanted to have the Republic of Hindustan, Dominion of Hindustan and Pakistan. But to cut a long story short, there are details about this. So we had this, all the states, all the princely states were given the options that either they could, if they were very large, if there were 21 gun salute states, they were allowed to retain their boundaries. If there were smaller states, then they were merged with one large state. Then you had Travancore, Cochin come together. So many of these interesting stories that happened in that period from 1947 to 1950. About Hyderabad and Jammu Kashmir, some of the lesser known facts are that it is not that, Mr. Jinnah did not want either Hyderabad or Jammu Kashmir to be actually part of Pakistan, because Mr. Jinnah, my research shows, also the research of Ishtiaq Ahmed shows, that he hated two people in this country very much. We think it was perhaps Gandhi or Nehru or Patel. He hated, the two people he hated most were the Nizam of Hyderabad and Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah. He hated the Nizam of Hyderabad because he was a very powerful person. The world's Elon Musk and Adani and Ambani and everybody put together. He was the richest man of his time. And the Britishers had given him the title of His Exalted Highness. The others were His Highness. He was called His Exalted Highness because of two reasons. One, that he gave a lot of money to the Britishers in the First World War. And secondly, the Britishers wanted a firman from him so that the Muslim troops could participate in the First World War. Because Muslim troops had a little reluctance to go and fight against the Khalifa, against the Caliphate. So he, in order to give this firman, so he said, give me something more. So the Britishers were very smart. So they added the word exalted to him. So he ranked first in the hierarchy of, Indian states. But that also gave him the idea that he's a great Muslim leader. And he was a great man in the sense that he contributed to the Caliphate fund also. He got his kids, he got his son and nephew married to the daughters of the Khalifa. And he also got His Exalted Highness. And he never liked Mr. Jinnah. Mr. Jinnah also did not like him because they hated each other. Why I want to say all these things is that politics is not about, religion, caste, all these things are used. They're all utilized. They're all instrumentalities of leaders. There are other things. And Mr. Jinnah also hated Muhammad Abdullah because Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah was a popular leader. Or as a speaker, Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah would have had Mr. Jinnah, looking around like nothing because Abdullah could communicate. He was a great communicator. His defense of India in the UN is something which is well recognized. In 1938, Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah had been made the president of the Indian State People's Congress, which was the Congress outfit in the princely state. So all the Praja Parishads, whether of Patiala or of Hyderabad or of Bhopal, so he had the potential of being another very popular leader of the Muslims. And Mr. Jinnah did not want any of these two Muslim leaders anywhere in Pakistan. On the other hand, Mr. Jinnah wanted Jodhpur and Bikaner and some of these other bordering kingdoms to become part of Pakistan. And he told the Raja of Jodhpur and Bikaner that if you join India, India will become a democracy. It will be one man, one vote. The Congress is hell-bent on abolition of zamindari. What the hell will you do in India? You come and join Pakistan. And Jodhpur nearly joined, Pakistan. There are documents to show there was, heavy going on between him and so. But sooner or later, Patel and Menon got wind of it, and things didn't move in that direction. Anyway, so I now come to the map of 1950, in which India is now more or less, you begin to recognize India in the map of 1950 because these larger states have now become Raj Pramukhs. These become states under the Raj Pramukhs. Now, how do you manage these 562 Rajas and Maharajas? Because if one became the Raj Pramukh, the others would not like it. So like in the case of Exalted Highnesses and His Exalted Highnesses, the Ministry of States, we devised many mechanisms. So the Maharaja of Patiala, for instance, was called the Raj Pramukh, and the Maharaja of Kapurthala was called the Uparaj Pramukh. So that settled the problem of Pepsu. But in the case of Rajasthan, there were so many royals. In the case of Vindhya Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, you picked a stone and there was a Raja. So no offense to any of the royals. I'm sorry for that. They were not that common also, but they were not that uncommon either. Okay. So, we gave them titles like Raj Pramukh, Upraj Pramukh, Jesht Upraj Pramukh, Kanishta Upraj Pramukh. So there were many categories of these Rajas and Maharajas, and some of them had permanent positions as Raj Pramukh, some of them as Upraj Pramukh, some of them were elected. So everybody had a chance. So, it just shows how India sort of, kept on evolving and doing these things. So that was also the time when a lot of, this reorganization happened. Some states like Vindhya Pradesh came up, then Vindhya Pradesh dissolved. There were arrangements like the Matsya Pradesh, which never came on any map of this country. Now, Matsya Pradesh goes back to the days of Mahabharat. And, so all these things were happening. But in 1952, the first Hindi map of this country came up. And in the first Hindi map of the country, more than the fact that it was the first Hindi map, which also led to a lot of consternation in the Madras Secretariat, I'm told, because Madras Secretariat was up and down that how can you have a map in Hindi? So the Hindi map was not sent here, but it was used up north. So in the Hindi map of India, for the first time, the word Cheen or China appears on India's cartographical imagination. Before that, the Britishers never used the word China on our map. They always used the word Tibet, or they would use the word undefined territory. Up there, it would call it undefined territory. Incidentally, I must mention here, especially Thiru would find it interesting that, Tibet refused to recognize India. And Tibet said that, we will recognize India only if Tawang, where today the border clashes are, only if Tawang, Darjeeling and Kalimpong are shown as parts of Tibet, because Tibet, they believed, was all this area. So that the thing happened. But the important thing to notice about 1952 is that China made its appearance on the map of India. By 1956, by 1958, the 1956 map, China disappeared from the Tibet disappeared from the cartographic imagination of India. We only use the word China for that. Again in 1959, Tibet came back. So what I'm trying to show is that a map shows many things. A map is not just a map. A map is not just how you look at yourself. A map is also how you look at your neighborhood, how you look at the things around you. The next map, because I could have, if I were to discuss all the 80 maps, no publisher would publish a book of, 1,000 pages. So I had to restrict myself to those maps which I felt are comparatively more significant in the making of the country. So the next map is the 1953 map, when Madras state broke. Broke is not the right word, was reorganized when the Telugu-speaking population of all these areas, they wanted to, and that's how the first version of Andhra state was made in 1953. But in 1953, also the States Reorganization Commission was set up with Justice Fazil Ali, Panikkar, and Kunzru, and so they then decided to. So that thing happened, and the SRC report is a very widely read report in this country. They received about 1.5 lakh memoranda. Thank God we were not joint secretaries to the SRC. We would have gone mad. But to cut a long story short, what happened in 1956 was that the 4 southern states got their language, they got their linguistic states. But in other parts of the country, the linguistic states did not happen, because the thinking of the SRC was that border states should be large states, and they should be fiscally very sound, administratively very strong. And therefore, Punjab, Bombay, and Assam, 3 states which had a long border, very long border with then East and West Pakistan, these were not reorganized, because before the creation of the BSF on 1st December 1965, the defense of the borders was the mandate of the state police. And it was felt that if Punjab is 3 states, if Assam is broken up, if Gujarat and, so if this happened, then it will be difficult to have one strong police force under these states, and there would be administrative difficulty. So that was the reason why the SRC did not agree to this. So the SRC, at the end of SRC, all states were equalized. So you had 14 states at that point of time in 1956. Before that, another very interesting thing happened, that in 1954, the assemblies of Bengal and Bihar decided to merge their states. So they wanted a joint Bengal and Bihar. Now this is something which is not very well known, because this idea was scuttled. This idea was scuttled, one, by the Communist Party of India, which felt that their hold over the Bengali refugees would get lessened if the rehabilitation is done properly. And second was the opposition from the UP Congress, because the UP Congress felt that that would be the end of the hegemony of UP over national politics, because the joint Bihar and Bengal would probably be at par, if not even more powerful than the state of UP. So that is 1954. Then we come to 1956. Then you have the map of 1960, where finally there's a major agitation in Bombay, and Bombay, Maharashtra and Gujarat are separated. Now the interesting thing to note about 1960 is, the map of 1960 is that all political parties in this country were opposed to the reorganization of Bombay at that time, except for Dr. Ambedkar, because the communists have been changing their stand every now and then. I mean, the Communist Party has been, unfortunately, they've had their, they've changed their stance many times. But there, at that point of time, both the Communist Party and the Congress Party did not want this new states to happen. But the ground level reality was such that they had to concede. Both the legislators of the Communist Party and the Congress Party, they broke ranks, and these two states were made. 1961 is the time when Goa was integrated into India. That's another interesting story, part of the global politics. 1963 is another very important date when Nagaland was created. When Nagaland was created, it meant that after Nagaland is created, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, all these states had to be created because the principle of accepting an ethnic group to form its own linguistic state or its own ethnic territory, if they give up secession and if they agree on the overall borders of the country. So the borders of Bharat are akhand, but the borders of the state are not akhand. I mean, you can have within Bharat, you can have many territories, but Bharat's territorial integrity should not be questioned. That was the point. So you got Nagaland with a population of 3 lakhs at that point of time. So that's an interesting thing. So and then of course you had 65, the war, then 66, we got the reorganization of Punjab. When Punjab was made, then Haryana and others, the Himachal Pradesh automatically came into being. Punjab, I just wanted to share with you that the Punjab as it was in 1858, after the Britishers took away Punjab from Awadh and UP, United Provinces and UP to make it part. At that time, Punjab stretched from Delhi, Gurgaon, right up to Rawalpindi and Dera Ghazi Khan. That Punjab has seen 10 formations from after 1947. Delhi, of course, became a union territory much earlier. So that's another story about how Delhi is. In fact, the beautiful description of Delhi, Delhi, we look at it in terms of Hastinapur and many other stories. But after Hastinapur was in fact Meerut. Indraprasth was a part of Hastinapur. Hastinapur or Meerut was the more dominant area. So Indraprasth, Bagpat, Panipat, Sonipat, these were the 5 villages which the Pandavas had wanted. So Indraprasth was one of them. After that, political power in India had moved to, it had moved to Patliputra, it moved to Ujjain, it moved to Peshawar. Delhi retained a garrison city and a trade city till again Angpal Tomar made Delhi the important city. And in the museum in Delhi, it says, Tomar says that in the heaven called Haryana, there's a hamlet called Dehlika. So he says that Delhi is a small hamlet in the heaven called Haryana. So one can imagine, how history, transforms itself. But anyway, so we were in 1965, so all these things happened. Then 71, you have Himachal Pradesh created and, all these smaller states. Some become union territories, some others become states. Move on to 75, when Sikkim becomes a part of India. And when Sikkim had to become a part of India, again, the constitution had to be amended twice over. The 35th Amendment to make it an associate state, and the 36th Amendment to make it a full state. Because as per Article 3 of the Indian Constitution, we cannot cede an inch of territory and we cannot add an inch of territory. Now, Sikkim's story becomes important because it shows how demography affects us all. In 1870s, the Lepchas and Bhutias of Sikkim, who were in their monasteries and moving their prayer beads, they didn't want to cultivate their lands. So they invited the Nepali workers to come and cultivate the lands around their monasteries. So 80 years' time, the Nepalis grew and grew, and the Lepchas and Bhutias kept, doing their prayer beads. And by 1947, 60% of the population of Sikkim was Nepalese, ethnic Nepalese, who wanted to be part of India. They wanted to merge with India because in Chogyal's system, there were 60 seats in the Sikkim assembly, 20 for Lepchas, 20 for Bhutias, 20 for Nepalese. So Nepalese were actually disenfranchised. So at that time, when they wanted to be part of India, under the influence of Mr. Vered Elvin, this whole area of Nefa and things, for whatever reasons, it was decided that let this area continue to be as it is. It's important to make a very clear distinction between Bhutan, Nepal and this. Nepal was on a different axis altogether. Bhutan was the protectorate, and Sikkim was a part of the Chamber of Princes. So he was part of the same chamber to which Maharaja Patiala was there, to which Maharaja Baroda was there. His Exalted Highness, of course, refused to join this chamber because he felt that he is a cut above the rest. So, in any case, Sikkim also tells us how history can be written from so many different angles. If I talk about the history of Tamil Nadu, the history of Punjab, so many books have been written that you can't really understand how perspectives are. But in the case of Sikkim, there are 4 books that were written. The 5th book has just been written by an IFS officer who gives a different angle. But the first book is written by Sunanda K. Dattare, who was a friend of the Chogyal. So he wrote the book called Smash and Grab. Next book was written by an administrator, B.S. Das. He called it the Sikkim Saga. Now, there is no dispute about the facts, but the way in which you put the facts makes it very different. Then you had Andrew Duff, who was a Scottish person, whom I've had the pleasure of conversing at several festivals. He drew from the private correspondence of his aunts, who were the school teachers in the missionary school there. Right? So that was the next perspective. And then you had the perspective from the head of RAW, Mr. Sidhu, who wanted to give a tribute, who said that he wrote it from the point of view of Chogyal. And our foreign service colleague has written it in the context of the India-China warfare at that time. That's what Mr. Gokhale has also alluded to. But anyway, so what I wanted to say is that many books all of them have different perspectives. So that was 75, 78, you got Meghalaya, Mizoram became a full-fledged state. So Lal Denga, whom we had first arrested in the NSA, whatever was the NSA called at that time, he became the chief minister. And it shows how India was able to accommodate rebels into chief ministers. And it's a fantastic story of that. So we move on, and then we come to the 2000, when you had a bipartisan consensus on Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and Uttarakhand. So these 3 states were made. And this time, both the political parties were taking credit. I mean, Congress said, we made Uttarakhand. BJP said, we made Uttarakhand. And it's a fantastic story because demographics has changed. I mean, the demographics of Chhattisgarh and all this has changed because at some point of time, the Jharkhand party wanted a united Bengal and Bihar because in that formation, the tribals would still have become a very strong party there. Then, of course, you have Telangana, and finally you have Telangana goes on to show that you can have a linguistic state, I mean, other than Hindi also, a language group can have 2 states. It is not necessary confining one language to one state is not an optimal formula. And finally, we had the reorganization of Jammu Kashmir. But before I hand over the mic to be grilled, in 1948, the Ladakh Buddhist Association had gone on record saying that we do not want to be part of Kashmir. We want to be why don't you merge us with the Lahore-Spiti area of Punjab, which was then under the Punjab Hill States, and put it up with the Paudi Garhwal and the Teri Garhwal areas of Uttarakhand, so that we can have a large, connect, because linguistically and ethnically, this was all one land, where people were mostly Buddhist, Tibeto-Burman in their language and culture. But that did not happen, and the rest is history. So, friends, this is the brief story of India through her maps, which the first title that I used for it was Mapping the Indian States, Aspirations, Assertions, and Adjustments, because everyone aspires. Everyone aspires for a linguistic state or an ethnic state. We assert, sometimes with the pen, sometimes with hunger strikes, sometimes with violence, and then we adjust, because neither India nor any of the units within India has got exactly what it wanted. I mean, we've all, Punjabi Suba is not what Punjabi Suba wanted. I mean, there's still a fight going on between Karnataka and Maharashtra. I mean, the entire area in the northeast is, every day we have these border disputes. So this is it. So now over to you, sirs.
Appa. Half an hour and he's covered, decades and decades of India's history. I think while he catches his breath and takes more water, let me tell you a story, a very, very interesting story which many of you might not have heard about what happened actually in India. This is regarding the Teen Bigha corridor. and Sanjeev has been serving there, so he'll tell you more about this. But many of you would only know that Teen Bigha corridor was Teen Bighas of land, which was a corridor between the Bangladesh enclaves on both sides of the border. But what was this enclave? So this is very interesting. It seems the Maharaja of Kuch Bihar and the Faujdar of Rangapur, they were engaged in a game of chess. And what they were actually putting at stakes was not chips, but chits. Now, chits are villages. So, well, they ended up, by the end of the day, several villages had exchanged hands between the two. And in 1947, when India gained independence, Rangpur became part of East Pakistan, later Bangladesh, and Kuch Bihar merged into India in 1949. But what happened to the villages? They remained where they were, but they did not belong to the country that they were attached to. So you had a situation where people were citizens of one country, but were surrounded by the territory of another. And this technically became an enclave. So there were 111 Indian enclaves in Bangladesh and 51 Bangladeshi enclaves in India. All this I'm telling so that he can get his breath. Huh? I'm not taking away your thunder. The enclaves for 70 years did not have even the basic amenities because each of those countries just refused to accept them as their own people. They said, you are a foreign territory, but India couldn't reach those villages and Bangladesh couldn't reach these villages. So this was their plight. Now, in Sanjeev's book, there's a detailed explanation or description of what happened, why each country could not accept the territory of the others, and finally what happened. And that is where I get associated. Because I did the survey of these villages on both sides of the border when I was the Registrar General. And I happened to have the privilege of flying down to Bangladesh and spending a night in what is called the district of Lal Munir Hat. So we spent the night there, went to the enclaves the next day, and you should have seen the joy on the faces of the people when they, because 70 years nobody had acknowledged them and they thought that we had come as a liberation army. And we were garlanded and taken around in processions everywhere. So this, and a side story to this was that the plane in which we went, it was a Home Ministry plane, it crashed after a few flights. And all of them in the plane died. So that is still etched in my memory, and why this incident is so fresh in my memory is that plane, probably we were the last to fly in that plane. It was a Home Ministry 6-seater plane. Your colleague and two of us had gone in that plane. So this is the story of the enclaves, and I would like Sanjeev to talk more about this because he's been on the ground in Kuch Bihar and he talks of all those areas like Mekli Ganj, where we entered into Bangladesh. And believe me, I thought a border, international border, would be something very impressive to look at, like the Wagah border or something. But you go there, there's this puny bamboo stick, and one side there is the flag of India, on the other side there is the flag of Bangladesh, and this is the border. And most of the time, the border is not even this thing. The house, front end of the house is in India, the backyard is in Bangladesh. That is how porous that whole border is. And I'm sure many of you will be visiting those areas. So we would like to know, Sanjeev, since you have been in that area and you studied this issue, I think if you throw light on such minor facts of Indian history, it would be nice.
Thank you, Thiru. Thank you, Chandramouli. You know, this enclave issue has been there. We finally resolved. There were also enclaves of Kuch Bihar in Dhubri district and Dhubri district's enclaves in Kuch Bihar. So I remember that in one of the elections, we had to set up polling booths after crossing Dhubri, which is the neighboring district in Assam. So anyway, we've resolved those issues. But the interesting thing about this enclaves is that even when the prime ministers wanted to settle this issue could not be settled because of this, because we didn't have a land boundary agreement. That happened only in 2015. We had that land boundary agreement. So let me read you this interesting passage. So what happened was that after after Bangladesh was created, then it was decided that let's at least build a bridge over the two, so that you could connect it, because India could not give land to Bangladesh. So it was decided that we will lease land to Bangladesh. So it was decided that we will lease this 3 acres of land for 999 years to Bangladesh at a lease rent of rupee 1 per annum, which also the President of India in his magnanimity decided to waive off. So it was only in 2015 that after the land border agreement, this thing has now been sorted out, which again shows that it is much easier for a unitary state to pass a legislation. For instance, in India, it's so difficult because and that also shows the dynamics between the states and the center. Now, when it comes to Teesta waters, the government of India would want a settlement, but the government of West Bengal puts its foot down. The border states are, these are the sort of issues which happen. But Teen Biga is a very interesting story because we had that. So also it shows that if you want to settle an issue, you can settle it out. For instance, without breaking anything of the citizenship clause, of the territorial integrity of India, nothing stops you from leasing land, leasing in land or leasing out land. So for all practical purposes, you've given that strip of land. But in the legal sense, you still are the owner till the LBA was settled in 2015. And settling the issue with Bangladesh is very important for us because our entire Look East policy will depend on whether we can build the roads and bridges and connectivity through Tripura and all these things. In fact, now that the road through Tripura and rail connections have been done, the distance between Agartala and Calcutta has been reduced from about 1,500 kilometers to 400 to 500 kilometers. And that will lead to a major economic transformation of the Northeast.
No, Hello. I just have an addition to what both of them said, that it's just a coincidence that I was also Joint Secretary for Bangladesh. And around 2009, we had Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who was elected after nearly 11 years of military rule. And I think there was a certain sense that we should resolve the boundary issue. So apart from the enclaves which you mentioned, there is something also called adverse possessions. And the longest boundary which we have, contrary to what people think, is not with China but with Bangladesh. It's more than 4,000 kilometers. And there are 5 states bordering it. And with one state, there is no problem. Mizoram and Bangladesh, I don't think, had any problem on the boundary. All the others have adverse possessions. So after nearly 3 decades of discussion, it was only in 2010 that when I, as a joint secretary, my counterpart was a joint secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs. So he came there, but publicly it was very difficult to tell people that, that we are actually going to lose or gain territory. So what we did was both of us had a cup of coffee in Oberoi, I still remember, and we decided what to do. So when he came back, we did all the public statements, and after the end of it, we produced a joint statement, the first joint statement after 3 decades, which actually said that this much, approximately, we said these are the adverse possessions and it's important that we negotiate further. So it was very interesting, and as you said, it has not been easy. And that actually brings me to another point. This show is about you, but I just wanted to make a statement. I just wanted to say that, India has been extremely sincere when it comes to negotiating on our boundary issues. We are very, very focused on resolving them. But we always have some neighbors who are not interested in resolving them. And I'm not talking just about China. There are others and who are smaller than us, and they find it difficult to resolve it with India. Sometimes we get frustrated with them. As I said, it took nearly 3 decades for us to even get a joint, and it was even called a joint media statement. We didn't want to be it was just for the media, but ultimately we listed it out. Because firstly, it becomes they want to use it for their political ends. That is always there. But secondly, whatever the deal they have with India, it becomes difficult for them to sell it to their own people. Even if you give the entire thing to them, someone will say you sold out to India. So that has always been a problem with them. And what happened was that, with Bangladesh particularly, we had a maritime boundary issue with Bangladesh. And finally, Bangladesh decided that this should be taken to the UNCLOS. Under UN law of seas, they can invoke an arbitration, which they did. And finally, the arbitration award came, and India straight away accepted the award. And we have implemented it. There are some small issues there, but the important thing is this is what we did. And even before, we have the famous case of Kachativ, and which is very emotional in this part of the country. But even I think last week there was some question about it, and India answered that according to the maritime boundary, Kachativ falls on the Sri Lankan side. That's what we have answered. So I think overall, whenever they are ready to negotiate, we are always there. And this is a very interesting thing. Why I'm mentioning it is in South China Sea, you all know that China refused to accept the arbitration award of UNCLOS, which is the law of the sea. The Philippines went, they won it, China refused to accept it. So in many countries, like Australia and East Timor and others, they try to bulldoze their way through, because of being a big power. So India has been a very responsible power that way, even if they dealt with smaller countries. So that said, I wanted to ask you about our foreign territories like Goa and Pondicherry, because it's just next to us. So how did Puducherry and Goa, because they were entirely different type of the way they came in, even though they were around the same time.
Yeah, you see, one thing is that as far as India and France are concerned, I think the first agreement that the Dominion of India had was with the French. I think within 14 or 15 days, I think within 28th August 1947 itself, India and France had issued a joint statement that we will settle our disputes amicably. So these are entirely two different things, because with Puducherry, Yannan, and Karaikal, it was fairly smooth. I mean, there was, of course, Mr. Gobert, Edward Gobert, you would know the name better, Gobert, who was a French socialist leader. And for some time, France had made Pondicherry part of the Fourth French Republic. So for some time, the people in Pondicherry did get the idea that they can be senators in France and all these things. So this did happen for some time, but on the whole, there was not major difficulty insofar as France is concerned, because after the loss of Indochina, I think the French had also clearly agreed, and it was a fairly amicable settlement. So although the de facto positions had come to India in 1954, the de jure took some more time. So that happened in 1962, I think. But things were fairly okay. The issue was with Goa, and especially the Salazar regime, because Salazar, the Portugal brought in the treaties they said that, they had treaties with the Queen of England, with the King of England, because King of England and King of Portugal had several treaties. So they were also bringing in the NATO aspect. They were thinking that, if there is a fight with Portugal, then perhaps the whole NATO would get involved. So we were a bit, and I think Mr. Nehru was quite right in not pressing the action, because actually taking military possession or taking over Goa was cakewalk, just like Operation Polo was a cakewalk. It just required a decision to be taken. Goa was taken over in 28 hours. And the same General Chaudhary was there in Operation Polo at Hyderabad. The thing that happened was that, Berlin Wall happened around, I think, August or September of 1961. And when the Berlin Wall happened, at that time a clarification was given that NATO will support each other only in the geography of North Atlantic. And within about 48 hours, Mr. Nehru had given a statement that now I shall be telling my forces to liberate Goa by force if required. And that's what happened. So I think the Berlin Wall, the establishment of the Berlin Wall, the clarification about what NATO would do in the case of the Berlin Wall, helped us to, get Goa back into shape. But before that, I must share one other interesting thing, that in 1954, Dadra had already been liberated. Dadra and Nagar Haveli had been liberated by the RSS, the Gomantak Dal workers, and also the Congress workers. So it's also a myth to say that the RSS and the Congress have never worked together. On several occasions, especially in Hyderabad, Jammu Kashmir, and Goa, the Congress and the Gomantak Dal regional party and all of them have also worked together. Today, neither the Congress nor the RSS would like to admit that they have worked together, but in the past they have worked together. And in 1954, they had declared themselves the Free Parishad of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. And in 1961, an IAS officer, Mr. Badlani, was made the Prime Minister of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. And then he sat like we sat with Mr. Nehru and signed the agreement that Dadra and Nagar Haveli is now a part of India. So there's no territory left. So there's no chance for us, to too late in the day. I mean, had we been in the 51 batch, perhaps we could have had a chance.
So again, let me give him some rest. Now, he has explained very well about Jammu and Kashmir and the entire sequence of events. And he mentioned that it was the rivalry between Jinnah, between the Nizam of Hyderabad and Sheikh Abdullah, which really, impacted Jammu and Kashmir in a big way. But there was one more rivalry which I would like you to comment about, and that was the rivalry between Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Patel. And I'd like to quote what happened when the incursions took place, the tribal incursions took place in Jammu and Kashmir, and Maharaja Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession and desperately called for India's help. Now, this was the situation which Sheikh Abdullah's PA, Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad, who was present, he describes the situation and says, Lord Mountbatten exhibited studied diffidence. Panditji presented a picture of acute anxiety and deep concern. Sardar listened, did not utter a word. He was a picture of calm equipoise. His silence was a strange contrast to a picture of defeatism and helplessness that otherwise pervaded in the meeting. Suddenly, Sardar moved in his seat, and immediately after, his gruff and resolute voice attracted everybody. He said, Look here, generals, Kashmir must be defended at all costs and come what may, resources or no resources. This must be done. Do whatever you like, but do it. Muhammad notes that after saying that, Patel got up from his seat, saying that the operation to save Kashmir would begin the next morning, and it did. So there was this undercurrent which also impacted affairs in Kashmir, and we would like to hear from you about Kashmir.
You see, the point is that had Nehru not insisted on the release of Muhammad Abdullah and his being made a part of the cabinet, this thing could have happened about a month earlier. I mean, it would not have happened in August, because if you follow the events from August, September, October 26, 27 is when the instrument of accession was signed. But the Maharaja was clear by the end of August, beginning of September, that his fate lies with India. I mean, that he had, although it must be placed on record, that around, because till Ramchandra Kak was his Prime Minister, and he was removed as the Prime Minister on the 10th of August, 5 days before independence. The then Prime Minister of Jammu Kashmir was unceremoniously removed, called a traitor, and put in prison, Mr. Ramchandra Kak. Now his memoirs have become available. At that time, the Maharaja was seriously considering to be part of Pakistan. I mean, the Maharaja of Jammu Kashmir and his Hindu Prime Minister were quite okay to go to Pakistan. But after that, the scenario changed. And the other thing about this instrument of section is this is the only one in which by hand that term that, and plebiscite and other things got added. So had the instrument of accession been accepted earlier, at the first time when the Maharaja had offered it, and Nehru had not insisted on Sheikh Abdullah being released and Sheikh Abdullah being given a prominent place in the thing, but that would have, the rest is history. We are aware that as far as propagating Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah as a pan-Indian Muslim popular leader, that was something on which Subhash Bose and Nehru had agreed. And that is why in the Tripuri session he was given this place of importance.
Thank you so much for that wonderful walk down our history and for making it relevant to today. So my question, Sanjeev ji, is India's map is still alive, as you said. We still have border disputes, and I'm not a historian, but I'm interested to know how you perceive these kind of disputes, or, for example, the aspirations of certain villagers to join Telangana state, and they're not part of Telangana. Or, people, as you said, are still dissatisfied. And as regular citizens of India, we may have a view on the change of a name, for example, of Bangalore to Bengaluru or Madras to Chennai, but perhaps it's the people who live there who should have the first claim. So how do you look at, this kind of living map, and who should have the final say? Because you've been an administrator. I mean, should the people there who live there have the final say, or should it be a more sophisticated process? Thank you.
You see, thank you for your question. It's a very difficult question and no easy answers. But let me tell you, it is not that things are not contested. Let me give you the example of Darjeeling, where I worked. You see, the Gurkhas in Darjeeling would want a separate state called Gurkhaland. The Bodos would want a Bodoland. But the fact of the matter is that today, in the area in which Gurkhaland they want, there are fewer Gurkhas and more Bengalis. In the case of Bodoland, there are fewer Bodos and more Assamese. So what happens is that how do you decide? I mean, where there is no problem, there is no problem. Problems are always at the border, at the fringe, right? So in the middle of Karnataka, there is no issue of any district or any block wanting to join Maharashtra. It will be only at the border. And that is where the contest happens. Where it is not that 100% people want to go there. If 100% people wanted to do something, it'll be much easier. But these are all contested areas. And these contested areas happen because demographics changes. Take the case of Cooch Behar, which you just mentioned. In 1947, when the country became independent, or just before that, it was a Koch territory. There were only 29% Bengalis in Cooch Behar. But in 6 months' time, the number of Bengalis far outnumbered the people who were the local inhabitants. So then what happens to Cooch Behar? Now Cooch Behar will go to Bodoland, or will it remain part of Bengal? That becomes the question. You see, so these are when demographics changes, and it will keep changing. I mean, take the case of Delhi, for example. In Delhi, in 1941, the census of Delhi had 7 lakh people. There were 4 lakh Muslims. 3 lakh Muslims went to Pakistan. And about 5 lakh Sindhis and Punjabis came to Delhi, thereby changing forever the character of Delhi. So everything keeps changing. So demographics makes such a lot of difference. And that is why political parties are concerned about demographics. So if they are concerned, if people are concerned about how their pattern, how their neighborhood is changing, how their state is changing, they have a reason to feel that way. Right? It's not an answer to your question, because there are no simple answers in history. It's only an explanation to something that you've raised. Right?
Sorry to kind of, ask a different question altogether, but it may not be what you're talking about, but it goes back in years. For example, it could be hypothetical from Bhimpetka to 17th century. If an art historian or a fine art research person or a museologist, anybody related to culture and heritage, if they want one book like this, where it could be hypothetically begin with the Bhimpetka Indus, which is lot of research and contradictions, everything is happening, till about 17th century, because after Ravivarma and the traders came in, it's all been recorded. All the borderlines of all those dynastic rules, then the students of history, of the older history, might be able to understand and picture in their mind the interaction, interdependent in all those things that happen. Because for them, Maharashtra means only Maharashtra. They don't realize that Shivaji's rule extended north and south so much, so the Maratha influence. Or if it is Vijayanagar and Nayak, it was Telugu maybe, but then they were all over the Dravidian area also, the South Peninsula. So when you explain to them, you have to take them back to that period, to dynastic rule, and not to the linguistic division or whatever division now in current use. So if something is there, you can suggest, or if I could suggest, I would like a consolidated data or just an outline map with all those old names and old capitals and important cities and where the archaeological finds are marked in the map. Any suggestions, any acceptance, any research? I would be very happy to have it.
It's a very good idea. It's a very good suggestion. And in fact, when the NCRT had asked for suggestions on how the history of India ought to be rewritten, I had made a suggestion that, rather than look at a Delhi-centric history, we must look at the history of the various regions of India. Because at no point of time has Delhi been in full control of everything. In fact, the Marathas had occupied Delhi. I mean, from the late 18th century to the early till 1903, Marathas were in Delhi. The Sikhs had come to Delhi. I mean, had the Marathas, but the Marathas didn't win because of the fight between the Scindias and the Holkars. Now, but when we will rewrite our history, we'll also have to write all these difficult facts also. We will not only have to mention that Marathas were great, but we'll also have to mention that Marathas were hopelessly disunited. So these are some of these. So whenever we rewrite our history, we'll come out with some comfortable facts and we'll come out with some uncomfortable facts. So it's a process, and I would be very happy if more and more such work is done. Already a lot of work has started. You see, one good thing that has happened is that history has come out of the departments of history. A lot of us, like now here, Manu Pillai, Nandini, she has written on Durgavati. So all of us are not professional historians. We're trying to get history out of the classroom into the public domain, and I think it's a mark of India's evolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I have a question here from this young lady.
So, hi, sir. I wanted to ask a question to Tirumurthy, sir. Sir, actually, India has a very big potential in becoming a superpower. So, if that happens, what would be the world order, sir?
See, you asked a question where you need a separate session. It's not going to happen. In any case, since the topic is slightly different, let me just say that India has all the potential to become a big power. Not because of, we have a whole lot of things going for us. As we just discussed, our history, a very diverse history, the diverse country we have a very large country. But the most important of all, I think our leadership in, it was post-independence, of course, before independence as well, they thought for themselves. They were not afraid to take an independent line. The moment a country thinks for itself, it is big enough to take an independent line. Not all countries can do that because they are sometimes very small. So we have everything going for us. And you have seen in the recent Ukraine conflict, India has not hesitated to take an independent line, which means that you basically annoy both the parties. And that's exactly what we have done. But we are willing to stick to it, and we are willing to bear. And when you do that, that is a very clear sign that you will emerge as an independent pole, as an important power. That's why we have all the potential, and we hope we can capitalize on it.
Jai Hind. I have 3 questions. I'm going to ask the questioners to keep it short, and so too the respondents, because we're running out of time.
My question is about rising power of China. As you have solved many border issues, rising power of China and recent phase of which is happening now in a week ahead, we are seeing that 5-finger principles of China is more stronger and stronger. Can you suggest some ways to protect our country borders and our particular parts of the country in a way to make it more and more to solve the face-offs, or else to solve the problems which has happened earlier in the issue of Bangladesh, like that?
Good evening, sir. My question is to all the 3 of you, sir. As a senior bureaucrats, what are the struggles and on field experience you have faced to solve these all boundary problems, sir?
Good evening, sir. Thank you for covering a IR paper as soon as possible. My question is that India is actually a powerful country and we have so many chances to emerge out to be a powerful country. But then the stand is not given to us. Can you please suggest some ways that India is actually having all the potent to be a powerful country, but then the stand is not given to us. Can you suggest some ways for the youth of the nations to take a country to be a powerful nation of this world, as US is actually holding the power? Does India has any chance to become the powerful nation of this world?
He already answered her query on India becoming a superpower and the potential that we have. May I tweak your question more specifically to what can the youth do to contribute to India becoming a power in the global sphere? Yeah? The youth, how can the youth be a part of this growth of India?
I think you can start by voting and voting responsibly.
I think it's very important to think critically. As young people, you must engage in dialogues. You must engage with each other. You must engage with people who are not from your subject. Engage with people who are not from your state. Engage with people who you think are different from you. That is how we will build dialogues within the country. So if you're from Tamil Nadu, make a pen friend with a person from Kashmir. If you're from Kashmir, tie up with somebody from Lakshadweep. So it is this dialogue within the youth of this country which will make it great. That is the only way we'll become great. A nation does not become great only by GDP. A nation becomes great when it thinks that we are, and as Thiru had rightly said, we are now thinking differently. India is now a very fast-growing economy. Our domestic economy is strong. And, many of you are preparing for civil services. Look, there are two institutions in this country which are absolutely impeccable: the UPSC and the Election Commission. So fortunately, the strength of this country is that the process of election of the elected leadership is fair, and those who have to join the bureaucracy, that selection is also fair. And when you compare these two selections, compare our election process with that in the US of A, they can't decide for a month who has become the president. And look at the fights which they have in the US and in our country. Thanks to EVMs, thanks to the Election Commission, the system is running well. So let's celebrate what we have and let's strengthen it. And as he said, voting, getting into dialogues, talking, communicating, and I would say one more thing: learning as many Indian languages as you can. That itself will be a very great thing for all of us, and learning, that will be, to my mind, a very important contribution to this country.
No, I don't have too much to add, except to say that, you are the youth of the country. So you live in a different world than which I think three of us inherited. You're far more confident of yourself. You're far more confident of your country. You're far more confident of Indian values. And I think you're not afraid to assert yourself. And you're on par with any country in the world. Forget whether it's United States or the spelling bee is won by Indians every time. So you have a very, very strong, assertive mind, and we are very proud of the fact that we are confident of India. And I think that's the world you have inherited. So I don't think you should have any doubt about where the youth stands. But there was also a question on China. I think some border issues. You will answer that question because you're the best person to do it. But all I can say is that, China is willing to wait till they become economically strong. They were willing to wait. They have become economically stronger. They will be willing to wait till they become militarily stronger. They will be willing to wait till the border is settled the way they want. So China is excellent at the waiting game. That is part of their genes. And there's a wonderful book by my very dear colleague, Vijay Gokhale, who was also former foreign secretary, about how China negotiates with you and the mistakes people do when they negotiate with China. And one of them is this question of waiting for China. China just waits for you till the whole thing changes in their favor. Let me tell you that we have also learned to play some of these games, and we are no less than that. And when I say that we are very anxious to resolve the border and resolve it, and we are committed to it, that doesn't mean we compromise. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Thiru, for clarifying that. But I must tell you that the new border roads program, which the National Highways Authority of India have taken, and let me tell you that after 62, India has not lost any skirmish with China. In 67, we won the skirmishes with China in Gavlan or whatever, Doklam. So it's not the situation as it was in 62. Today, you have 5 border guarding forces in this country. I mean, very clear objectives are laid down. Assam Rifles has to do what, ITBP has to do what, BSF has to do what, SSB has to do what. So we are a far more organized nation than we were and that's the only the only instance when India has not been able to, to face the adversary with strength. Today, if something happens, it's great. But on the issue, let me tell you another story about Tawang. Tawang was taken over by a person called Major Bob Cutting. Now, Major Bob Cutting was a very interesting story. Major Bob Cutting was a Tangkhul Naga. And, he was a teacher in a school, but he was a very, obviously must have been a powerful communicator. So he was picked up by the local deputy commissioner, British deputy commissioner, and given the Viceroy's commission in the British Army. Then he became a major in the army. Then he joined the Assam Rifles. And in 1952, he went and took over Tawang when Jairam Das Daulatram was the governor of Assam. And because of that, because he'd gone and taken over Tawang, Tawang firmly is now a part of India. So we need to salute the courage and acknowledge some of these little-known heroes of this country. I must also mention that Cutting as a great hero. I mean, he started life as a school teacher, became a major in the Viceroy's Army, became a major in the Assam Rifles, then joined the Indian Frontier Administrative Service, then became Deputy Commissioner of Mokokchung. And in 56 and 57, the Naga conventions were held there. He became the Chief Secretary of Nagaland and then became our ambassador to Burma. So that's Major Bob Cutting.
So we end on that note, and it is my pleasant duty to thank all our speakers of today. Right from the morning, we've had very in-depth discussions, and I am indebted to all of them for making this a very interesting day, a first maiden attempt of CIC. We could have done better, but I'm sure we'll learn and then build from strength to strength. And a special word of thanks to Sanjeev here, who has curated the entire festival. I'm thankful to all the moderators, all the authors, and last but not the least, Mamta. Yeah. A big hand for her. She has enlivened the proceedings, and many of you who wanted to sleep were not allowed to sleep. So I think we should thank her for that. And we hope to see you tomorrow in the Young Writers section, though the venue there will be at the Shishya School in OMR. So many of you who have shown keen interest in the books, and Mamati is also one of the authors who's going to launch a book tomorrow. So if you're interested, you're most welcome. And over to you, Mamati, for the concluding honors.
Thank you so very much. I would definitely say this first collaboration of the Value of Words and Chennai International Center has definitely been a resounding success. Wouldn't you? Congratulations, gentlemen, and to many, many more. And thank you very much for your very kind words for me. And thank you for your acknowledgement of the same too. I would also like to thank the Kalakshetra Foundation for allowing us to hold this most wonderful occasion in this most legendary of spaces in Chennai, Tamil Nadu. This is part of our legacy. This is part of us growing up. It's part of our ethos. And to have this done here was very heartwarming. So thank you, Kalakshetra Foundation. Thank you to all the technicians. Thank you to the gentleman who so kindly did such wonderful sound work today. This is one of the best sound setups I have ever worked with. So kudos to you. Thank you to all the people who helped, the people who have the bookstalls, the people who served us lunch, and thank you most importantly to all of you literature and art lovers who have come here today to be a part of day one of the Chennai Literature and Art Festival 2022. Day two is tomorrow, like he said, young writers. We have 4 fabulous sessions with 4 fabulous authors and 4 fabulous moderators and the children of Sishya School who were here earlier. I should thank them. Aditi, Neha, I think they have left. Neha's here? Okay. Neeraj and they've left. And Yukta. Yukta is actually going to be part of enacting something from my book too tomorrow, so I should say that very specifically. I would love to see you all there. We would love to see you all there. Drive safe. Yes, you are part of the Chennai International Center and of Value of Words, but we also want you to read our words. And so there they come. A little token of our love to you. Okay. Before we leave, 2 things. One is there are a lot of UPSC aspirants here. There are students here who want to follow in your footsteps. So all the best to all of you. And if you could all stand up, rise to our feet for the national anthem.
Jai Hind.